He had shoved her a few times when she pressed him about why he was avoiding her, and he'd even started yelling at the younger cousins any time they got on his nerves. Rosa blinked the stinging from her eyes. What happened to the Eduardo she'd looked up to for as long as she could remember? The doting cousin who taught her to swim when no one else could even coax her into the water, who taught her to ride a bike, not to be afraid of dogs. The math whiz who helped her make an adventure out of everything, from times tables to algebra. Eduardo had been her hero, the big brother she never had. If only she hadn't eavesdropped. What if he was in danger? Clearly, someone was. Rosa's mind screamed with possibilities, and the skin on her arms turned to goose flesh. What if they were smuggling illegals into the country? Or what if it was even worse than that? Her mind flashed back to a recent TV documentary about slavery in the 21st century. She shuddered. Was Eduardo involved in that? The guy who threatened him sounded capable of anything. A train whistle startled her. She shivered. The air had turned chilly, and the sun had dropped behind the metal roofs of the storage facilities. She pulled the windbreaker out of her backpack, her hands shaking, and slipped it on, the stranger's threat repeating in her mind like a stuck CD. Rat us out to the cops and your dead men. Rosa began to run, and then run faster and faster, lamenting that she had shirked her babysitting responsibilities and had stumbled into something she had no business knowing, but couldn't ignore. She raced past the high school, vaguely aware that the clock at City Hall had chimed 5 times, and came to a stop at the red light at Stanton and First. She leaned over, her hands grasping her knees, and tried to catch her breath. What should she do? If she confided in her parents, they'd feel obligated to tell the police. No, Eduardo was the one she needed to talk to. Maybe she could reason with him and get him to stay away from these dangerous men. The light turned green, and she darted across Stanton and raced toward Mockingbird Lane. What if it was too late? What if Eduardo had become just like them? What if he was capable of hurting her, doing whatever it took to shut her up? What if he knew she had followed him and decided just to deal with her later? Make sure they never get a chance to scream, one had said. She swallowed a sob and kept running, trying not to think about what that meant. Chapter 1. Ouch! Police Chief Brill Jessup yanked her hand away from the stuck desk drawer and shook it a few times, keenly aware of her broken thumbnail and the embarrassment scalding her face. She stole a glance through the blinds covering the glass wall, pretending not to notice Detective Captain Trent Norris's amusement. She wasn't about to ask him for help. How hard could it be to get the stupid thing open? "Everything okay, Chief?" Trent's voice sounded patronizing. "Yes, just fine." Brill reached for the stack of Thursday's mail in her inbox and sat back in the well-worn brown leather chair, her thumb throbbing, and her feet barely touching the floor. The desk chair was still too high, but she wasn't going to call the maintenance engineer and have him adjust it again. Why draw attention to the fact that she was a foot shorter than her predecessor and utterly useless with a screwdriver? She could live with it until she was off duty and could get her husband Kurt to help her. She wiggled out of the chair and ambled over to the window, her back to the glass wall and Trent's curious glances, and looked out through the magnificent trees of gold and orange and crimson that shaded the grounds around City Hall. In the distance, beyond the ridge of rolling hills, the hazy outline of the Great Smoky Mountains looked almost surreal against the bluebird sky. She had always admired the grandeur of the Mississippi River when she lived in Memphis, but it couldn't compare with the heart-stopping view on the other side of the state. Outside, anyway. She turned around and cringed at the monstrous bookcase that swallowed up the entire wall behind her desk. The other walls were dingy beige and bare, except for a few framed pencil sketches of Civil War heroes and an abundance of nail holes, glaring reminders of Chief Hennessy's passing. Brill remembered seeing the framed portrait of the chief that hung in the main corridor of City Hall, at the end of a long row of portraits of the other police chiefs who had served the community of Sophie Trace. How honored she felt to be counted among them.